So Nathan, we did have a question on LinkedIn regarding from Randy. What is your buying criteria or what's attractive to you? I'm not sure if we have that answer. That's a very vague question. So Randy, if you can clarify in the chat there, I appreciate it. And whatnot. So we talked about the fact that there's no way to protect it. Sohal asked, deed back to the seller and back again to the buyer. I think what you meant is sell it back to the original borrower, who sold you the property, and then deed it right back to the person you sold it to. So Sohal, hopefully that kind of clears it up. So it's interesting, right? Because we've heard all the different ways to avoid it, and you're right. Most people don't have that problem, but I like the fact you have a fix, right? When we look at this stuff, we had another question from Liz Priors. What's the best way to hold title in a personal name, a business entity, or a trust name? Is there a way you suggest people?
Yeah.
So a lot of states have passed some legislation that allows what's called a series LLC. I don't know if y'all have it or not. But entity selection process is in theory supposed to be a person and business specific review. However, 999 times out of 1,000, you're going to end up with an attorney saying, all right, Mr. Investor, a series LLC is best for you, which allows you to separate your properties. So you've got a property that has $200,000 equity. You've got a rental property that has no equity, but you have high liability of people falling down, getting hurt, suing you, what have you. You separate those two into different little sub-series. I call them sub entities. It's not actually that, but for all intents and purposes, you've got your series LLC, and then you can create little sub LLCs under those. So that's the best entity in my opinion.
So we had a question from Wayne Garrett over on LinkedIn. Have you ever had a previous seller blow up a sub two and deal with a couple of years later? They remarried and wanted to buy another house, and then they told the bank they sold it to you, or
That's
that situation come up?
Yeah, that's a fantastically intuitive question. When I said that the three that occurred were some type of inappropriate contact, one was that exact same scenario that from the question. He hit the nail on the head. So I call it the hugging your enemy and pulling the pin theory. He contacted the bank and asked the bank to foreclose because he sold his property.
Wow. How'd you resolve it?
It was moving towards litigation. The investor paid off the underlying mortgage, and that kind of took the wind out of the sails of the fella. But the other half of the question that was asked, what's intended there is, hey, seller now wants to go buy a house. Average guy can't get two mortgages, so we have mortgage one on his credit reporting. But one of the more important reasons we draft up a promissory note is because that seller can take that promissory note over to a lender, show anywhere between 6 and 12 months of timely payments, and that debt to income ratio issue, the debt of that is now removed from his credit at least 80%, depends on the lender, somewhere between 70 and 90%. So that fixes the debt to income ratio. So when we have that problem, we get the phone call, seller says, you were supposed to pay this off. I say, well, there were 19 different disclosures where you said you understood it was a wrap. I don't think that's really what you're intending here. Are you trying to get another mortgage? And then we educate them, hey, you don't have to pay this off. Here's how to fix your DTIs. So that does happen occasionally.
Awesome. That's good stuff. So we wanted to touch upon a few things for the note buyers out there too, right? So when you create this, are you creating a second lien on the property, this wrap note? Can you describe what that wrap note looks like? Is it a second lien? Is it a 1B? How does that look in the county records?
So Wells Fargo is going to be that first lien position on that property, whether it's a sub 2 acquisition or if someone's purchasing via mortgage wrap.
Let's just use some quick numbers here, right? So we have $150,000 first lien, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and we wrap it with $200,000. So we have a $50,000 difference. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's perfect. Yeah. I mean, a sub 2 is if you bought it for $150, exactly what's owed. A wrap is like you just described, a bigger note around a smaller note. So the wrap note is going to be a second lien position And that's the way we did it for years and years and years and years. But now folks are coming in and saying, hold on a second, I may want to just sell the 50,000, the equity in there. So they're creating two notes, the 150,000 sub two note. And this is usually investors selling the property, the 150,000 sub two note, but now another third lien of the 50,000 seller carryback note, so that we can now sell that equity and not have to get rid of the entire sub two portion.
Now, if I'm doing my math correct, and this is one of the questions we had in the very beginning in January, if I add up 200,000 plus the 150, is a total debt on that property $350,000?
If the escrow officer doesn't know what she's doing, the answer is yeah. And so I just now we get phone calls all the time, hey, y'all closed the file, but there's a lien that y'all didn't get released. You need to get that lien released, and they just don't understand that 150,000 lien stays there. So if you fast forward to the ending of a wrap, so someone's refinancing or they're selling the house, everything just starts rolling back down to where, okay, investor, I'm owed 200,000, and you provide that payoff to the escrow officer, but you also get Wells Fargo 150,000. They have to understand they have to net that out. They're not paying out 350. They're paying out 200,000 broken up between the 150 and 50.
So technically it's a second lien, but it's written up that it incorporates the $150,000. So the only part of that technically is a $50,000 second. Would you say it's correct? Or is it technically a 150 and a 200?
I say the 200 incorporates and subsumes that 150.
Okay.
So I like to look at it as we really just have one big lien for 200, and then it's broken up between the 150 and the 50 that's owed to the buyer.
Okay. So it's second lien, but kind of.
It's definitely from a legal standpoint, it is absolutely a second lien.
Sure. Yeah.
From a numbers standpoint, it's a net 50,000 second lien.
Right.
So if I go ahead and I buy your wrap note, right, and we pay off the first, what happens to that $200,000 wrap note? Does it subtract 150 grand off, or does it stay 200,000?
It stays 200. So
you're the note buyers. You can buy this wrap note for, say, for $150. If this number is 150 and the wrap is 300, and you give that person 150, 175 grand, and they have a $300,000 wrap note on it, and you buy that for that $300,000 note for 175, give them 25 grand in their pockets, pay off that first. You just bought a $300,000 first lien for $175. Just saying. At 10, 12%. Just saying.
That's my favorite. I've always been a first guy. I understand seconds. It's not really something I'm generally interested in. This, like I say, from a practical standpoint, from a legal standpoint, it's a second. From a practical standpoint, it's not exactly a second. But I still prefer that first position. So that would be my preference, is to pay off that underlying first. But yeah, it's an interesting situation.
And right now we're doing hypothecation, which means lending money to borrowers or to lenders who have a note in their hand. And we're typically giving them enough money to pay off that underlying lien to move us to first, right? And give them capital, right? Most people have equity in their position and they're just trying to cash it out, which is awesome. And nothing changes in the world of what we're doing. Now, we've talked about Dodd-Frank a little bit here. What is the rule of thumb? If, let's say, there's people out here who created a subject to and they did a wrap note and everything else, but they didn't underwrite the borrower. They didn't do the DTI and the ability to repay. Is there A, a way to fix it? And B, we've heard about this thing about a 3-year window that if it's been 3 years, it doesn't need to be underwritten.
Now, I don't know about a 3-year window, but in terms from a legal perspective, there's no fix. From y'all's world, there could be a fix. You go in and you start trying to go through that ability to repay or Dodd-Frank analysis, get an RMLO. So business wise, you can fix it. Law wise, you can't. And that's actually in Texas, the new legislation that was passed was Dodd-Frank wasn't very toothy, didn't bite you if you didn't comply really too much. Our new Senate Bill 43 amended property code and finance code, you don't comply and they come in and unwind the deal for you.
What's that look like? It's not
strictly speaking, it means that you pay back everything that the buyer has paid you, and you get the property back with some fines associated with it. So it's toothy, and then it also tucks it in. If you don't provide the 7-day disclosure before closing, for example, that's a Deceptive Trade Practices Act violation, which now brings you up to 3 times damages that's allowed. So this one's toothy. We're a little bit more respectful of it.
So
I hope that your group and your tribe is listening, because that right there is killer.
So Dave and I have talked to plenty of people that are doing seller finance, creative finance, and often we get response like, "What? You can't tell me what to do," and they can't tell me what to sell for. They can't.
I don't have to underwrite it. I don't use servicer. I don't need.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had the Federal SAFE Act and the Texas, the T-SAFE Act, Dodd-Frank, and those, there wasn't penalty like there is now in Texas. And you can get in trouble under Dodd-Frank. They can bring that in. There's just no Dodd-Frank police. And all of these things that we're talking about, the problem occurs when there's a default.
Right.
So if everything's fine, everything's fine.
Right.
But you have a defaulting borrower. I always say we're very, very polite foreclosing lenders. We're working with them. We're going through loss mitigation. We're helping them out because A, we're nice people. We have honor. And B, we don't want to get stuck with a microscope looking down at our documents.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we definitely want to make sure we do this. So Casey asked a question on LinkedIn. Isn't it technically a third lien when your end buyers are wrapped? The first is Wells Fargo. The second is deed of trust from the investor buyer to a third. And I think Julia made the comment that we need a whiteboard, and I completely agree with Julia, right? So Casey, I'm trying to dissect your question here, my man. Third lien to your, so if you do an 80-20 loan, technically it's a second and a third. So you technically have 3 liens on that property. Wells Fargo is the second. The first is Wells Fargo. Second is deed of trust from the investor buyer to the seller, and the third is from the end buyer to the investor. Casey, I'm not sure if I followed the question.
No, Casey's doing great. She can move to the front of the class.
Yeah. So yeah, I think so I apologize, Casey. I'll definitely wrap up with Alan and get that back to you. So that's cool stuff. But this field is amazing, right? And we do all this stuff and all this kind of cool creative financing and go around the system. And those people who are originating these things, creating a wrap note takes a lot of effort. Finding that buyer is key, right? Find the property is key. What do you tell people who are saying, I'm just getting started with the subject to world? How do you find the asset? How do you find the property? How do you find the borrower? What's your typical strategy?
You can go out and market specifically for this, and you're going to be looking at the foreclosures, looking at probate properties where there's a deceased owner, looking at properties that are both for sale and lease, vacant rental properties and things like that. So you can certainly market for it, and there's a lot of folks who do, and they're doing great. What I usually say is just make sure you understand this, you've mastered it enough so that you know what's going on. So when you see it, and that's really actually all that I do. I call it opportunistic investing. It's just one of the arrows that we have. Hey, Mr. Seller, we want to buy your house. All right, you don't have much equity in it. You don't have enough to even sell this thing and pay commissions. All right, well, we're going to move this over to a seller finance transaction. So you're looking for them when they occur at minimum. But you can go market. I don't like the foreclosure list because that means I say the vultures are already out there looking.
Yes.
So I want pre-foreclosure or pre-foreclosure, 30, 60, 90-day late lists. There's ways to find them, but very, very important to understand it. So when it comes up, you see it, and then you take the advantage of the opportunity.
So Nathan, we had a question from Drake on Facebook here. And
I was going to throw that one to you.
I know. So what I actually just
question.
recently came across from a note seller who wanted to sell something. I'm not sure if Brian's on, but so someone came up with the idea that they did a split note. I guess they did a subject to, and now they have seller finance note, and they split it 50-50, and they sold the property, and it's 50% ownership of that note. How we buy it. So I'm gonna tell you my strategy. I'll let Nathan speak on his strategy. Is what we're doing right now is we're figuring a way out that you buy out your partner, and then we give you enough money to pay off the first. I can't buy 50% of your note, because then if the borrower default, you default, I'm now JV with your other partner. And that just doesn't work because I don't know the other partner, and that's just not how I do business. So it makes it dirty. So what we were doing in our strategy, we're buying a note from someone, we're actually doing a hypothecation with that person, we're lending money, is we're working on a strategy that they sell 50%, their 50% of shares to their partner. So they have 100% ownership there. We fund a hypothecation to pay off their first lien. And then you sit there and you pay us that wrap note payment. It's a little higher than what you're making, but you only have it for 10 years, right? And after 10 years, it's done. You collect for the next 20 years. So Nathan, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, the same thing. I would need 100% ownership. The 50% thing, that throws me, because like you say, then I'm now a partner with somebody that I don't know. Yeah. And I'm not very comfortable with that. So I'd have to get 100%.